But, at the same time, a similar mother or similar me struggles to kind of get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym or do some CrossFit. So it definitely is around the space of what is the big goal that we're trying to work for? What is the motivating force that can really help us draw on this almost superhuman energy when we can find a way to tap into it?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dichotomy podcast. This is a show dedicated to exploring the dichotomies we experience in business and in life. My name's Reid, and I'm a guy who's incredibly fascinated by understanding why we make the decisions we do in life, and ultimately, how do we lead a good life? As a business owner, I get the pressures of managing business, family, money, health can create great inner conflicts around what we actually want out of our business and our lives. This podcast is dedicated to exploring just that. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Reid, and welcome to another episode of the Dichotomy podcast. Today's episode is with a gentleman by the name of Harvee Pene. And Harvey and I are good mates. We know each other through the Dent Business Accelerators. He's a client of ours. And of course, aside from that, we've just formed a really great friendship because the guy's an awesome human. He really is. He's probably one of the best, most down-to-earth human beings I know. And I have a lot of admiration for Harvey for a number of different reasons. Let me give you a bit of the formal bio to begin with. Harvey is an author. He's a TEDx speaker, but he's also the co-founder of a business called Inspire. And Inspire are life-changing accountants, which I know sounds a little bit lofty, but I think as you learn more about Harvey and you hear more in this conversation, you'll understand why. His book is called Cashed Up, which he's the co-author of with his business partner, Ben Walker. And it outlines the 7-step method to pull more time, money, and happiness from your business. His business mission is to become Australia's most impactful accounting firm. And his personal mission is to give 1 billion days of food, water, and health and sanitization to help end extreme global poverty by 2030. So this guy is on a big mission in the world. And the impact that he and his accounting firm have is phenomenal. I believe they've already been able to give over 5 million days of food, water, health, and sanitization to people in need all over the world just by running their business. And they have a really incredible business. Inspire is probably one of the most progressive and well-recognized emerging accounting firms in Australia. And Harvey is just, like I said, he's a good human. And I really, really enjoyed the chat that we had together. Let me tell you a little bit about what we talked about. Harvey faced cancer not so long ago, testicular cancer. And we talk a little bit about his journey of how he overcame that, how that impacted him, his business, his family, his partner. And we talk about this incredible journey that he went on over the course of just 12 weeks to be able to reduce his cancer count from I think about 400 units. I'm not exactly sure what the unit measurement is, but 400 down to 0 in a space of 12 weeks or so through approaching it with a bit of an alternative mode of healing cancer. And we also get into some really amazing conversation on bringing the principles of creating a successful business. Harvey runs a 7-figure accounting firm with about somewhere between a dozen to 20 staff and growing, and how you bring the principles of building a successful business into building a successful family. He's one of the most family-oriented, family-driven people that I know, and he's also one of the most optimistic and positive people I know. And we talk a little bit about how he developed that attitude and approach to life. We get into some conversation around bridging the gap or bridging between your business mission and your personal mission. But most importantly, we talk about the dichotomies that he's faced in building a really successful business as well as a really successful family. And how do you balance those two things? I think for a lot of people, it can feel like we're torn between making a little bit of a choice. Do we build the empire, or do we focus on building family life? And Harvey's been able to find a really beautiful blend so far between the two. Also, of course, facing his own challenges along the way. But that is a big theme of this conversation. And I just learned an incredible amount about how Harvey approaches that. I know you're going to learn some amazing things too. This is one of those episodes where I think a pen and a paper can be handy because there are a lot of nuggets of wisdom and a lot of actually really good tactics that we get into on how to balance those dichotomies between building a really successful business and a really successful home life at the same time. So, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this episode with Harvee Pene. Okay, I think it's worth mentioning before we get into the show, what is a dichotomy? Well, the dictionary defines a dichotomy as a division between two things that are opposed or feel opposed. So think of it as something in your life where you're feeling torn or conflicted. Maybe it's two opposing ideologies you have about life. Maybe it's something about your marriage or your business. Maybe it's the angel and the devil on the shoulder. Whatever it is, you're struggling to find balance and contentment with this dichotomy existing in your business or life. Now, all my conversations with my guests are pretty wide-ranging. We talk about business, philosophy, psychology, health, wealth, emotions. My goal is to tease out what are the parts of themselves or their life where they feel torn, afflicted, or uncertain. If they felt that way in the past, what did they learn in navigating that tension? If they're experiencing that right now, what are they discovering? As we unpack these concepts in the show, I hope you find some or all of them relevant for your own life and can apply the learnings as well.
Thanks, Mike. Cheers for having me.
Really awesome to have you. And look, we've got a bit of a backstory in terms of how we know each other. Can you maybe just share with the listeners kind of the context of how we came to meet and spend a bit of time together?
Yeah, well, I've essentially personally been in business all of my life, and we came to a point in our business journey where we were sort of having some challenges, whether they were financial challenges or whether they were ones about not being really well known or standing for anything in the industry. So we came across an amazing organization called, at the time, Key Person of Influence. And it was in there that I met this incredible mentor whose name was Mike Reid, who's definitely made an amazing impact in terms of the amount or our ability to stand out, scale up, and make a real difference in the world. So, that's how our journeys have crossed paths. And I'm really grateful, not just in a professional context, but also personally, that we've gotten to know each other, bro.
God, that question made me sound like I was just trying to pump up my own tires, but thank you. That wasn't my intention. I'm very grateful for our connection as well, not just at a business level, but at a personal level. I consider you a really, really good friend, and I've really enjoyed, spending time together over the last few years that we've known each other. But hey, mate, maybe also what I'm curious to just for you to share with the listeners is, can you describe your environment right now? Whereabouts are you?
Yeah, so I'm in one of the offices or meeting rooms within our office here in Fortitude Valley in Brisbane. So in front of me, I've got a massive 1.8 metre canvas showing a photo of my business partner, Ben, and his wife in Kenya on one of the impact tours that they did. And then to my left, a nice big, I think 50-inch screen that sort of cycles through some team photos and a number of our values. So, that's where we are today.
Amazing. You've got a really phenomenal office space, and it's quite unique because can you just share with everyone, what exactly do you guys do?
So we run an accounting firm called Inspire, and we sort of really identify ourselves as life-changing accountants. Living up to that name, Inspire, and that sort of ideology, it was important that we created an office space and an environment that really inspired our team every day they came into work. Because at the core, we really believe that accountants change lives. And so, some of the things that we've put throughout the office will help our team get into the right space to make an impact on our clients.
And so I came to your office a couple of months ago for the launch of your book, Cashed Up, and you had about 100 odd people who were attending. It was a really great evening, and it was shortly after you'd opened the office. And when you go into Harvey's office, it's a nice space. It's sort of an industrial type feel. I think it was an old, did you say it was an old lawyer's basement almost?
Yeah, it was basically all we could afford at the time. So, they used to store old boxes and files and dirty secrets and probably dead bodies down here, but we cleaned it all up and now it's our office.
And so when you walk in, you've done an amazing refurb, but there's these meeting rooms in the middle of the floor. And then, as you look around, every wall of the office, I think, is lined with some kind of, very inspirational sort of bit of either philosophy, or you look up on one wall and it might be the United Nations global goals that are put up on the wall, or there's a whole bunch of picture frames with Inspire philosophies on there around doing good in the world and having an impact and, really stepping up and making a bit of a dent in the universe. So, it's a very cool space. Harvey, outside of business, I was curious to maybe kind of kick off our conversation around, in your world right now, what's got your attention currently? What are some of the things in your life and your world that you're most excited, enthused, and inspired about right now?
Yeah, well, I'd definitely say the one little thing that's been consuming most of my attention lately is I became a dad just over 8 weeks ago to a beautiful little girl, Havana. She's been consuming most of my mornings, evenings, late nights, early mornings as well. But it's definitely shifted me into a sort of new perspective on realizing my role in the world, not just as a great human being and global citizen, but sort of nowadays is, how do I become a great dad? Because I've got this little girl now that I'm responsible for. So, that's been the main focus, at least over the last quarter.
And tell me about that experience. Dad for the first time, right? This is your first child that you've had. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's right.
And you've got quite an extended family as well. Sorry to interrupt. So maybe you could fill in the blanks for those listening as well.
Yeah. No, well, anyone who knows me knows that for me, like, family is absolutely number one. We're always surrounded by mum and dad and sister and extended family as well. How Havana came to be was a little bit of a miracle story where you might remember, actually, Mike, it was just this time last year, just over 12 months ago, that I was blindsided by testicular cancer. And, I was 31 years old, young, strong guy, I thought I was effectively invincible. So to kind of have that sort of health crisis come out of the blue was a real shock to my world at the time. And so going through the whole process of how am I going to survive this? What are we going to do beyond? What are the treatment mechanisms? And, doctors were saying stuff about, you're going to have chemotherapy and it's going to sort of wipe you out for the next 6 months and you probably won't be able to have kids, if ever. And just that whole crisis made me sort of self-assess where was life at that time, and if this was it, would I be happy with the impact I had made? And one of the decisions that came out of that crisis, not only was it to get healthy and to sort of prioritize health again, but it was realizing that it's time to start building our own family. And so, out of that, we focused on first getting healthy, which took about 12 to 18 weeks to get my tumor markers down to 0. And then, straight after that, we tried to start growing our family. And, happy to say 12 months later, here we are with a beautiful little bundle of joy who, for me is not just my daughter, but is a beautiful kind of daily reminder of how important life is or how precious it is. It's been lovely having her.
Yeah. And I'm really fascinated to dig into your experience with cancer because, that is something that you're a very optimistic, positive guy. And that's something that I think anyone who in the few minutes that have been listening to you right now would kind of get that sense that you've got this, you exude this really positive, amazing, optimistic sort of energy. But yeah, that would have been like a big thing, right? And how did you navigate that from a kind of psychological perspective, given that, your personality is so, optimistic and strong? Did that really kind of knock you for six in a way where it got you sort of into more of maybe a negative headspace, or how did that affect you?
To be honest, it all happened so quickly. So it was kind of only in sort of retrospect that I can acknowledge what the feelings were. Just to give you a sense of timing, I sort of started feeling like I was bruised a little bit on about the Monday. And come Friday, I was at the doctor's getting it checked out. Didn't think it was anything, major. And by Friday afternoon, I was, confirmed having had the cancer and was booked in to get surgery to have my testicle removed by the following Tuesday. So essentially kind of had a little window of a long weekend really to get my affairs in order in terms of getting the work stuff sorted and letting sort of key family and friends know. But in that same little window is like processing, what is going on? Like, how did this happen? Harvey, like, where did this come from? And so, there was definitely some dark points and a lot of tears and a lot of anxiety about the future, because I do tend to think, very far into the future and have a lot of goals that are in progress. It all sort of went into an uncertain state. But it honestly was thanks to, a lot of friends who were around me, yourself, your business partner, Glenn Carlson, my mentor, Paul Dunn, and my business partner, Ben Walker, who really helped sort of offset that sort of negative space that I was in for a little bit. And they really helped map out a pathway of not just that there was a cure or there was a way to get back to health, but that I could totally do that without much of the medical intervention that's usually sort of required for people to go through cancer. So, yeah, I did go to the deep, darkest places that I've ever been, but it was thanks to my friends who could see the light, who really helped pull me out.
And so how did you get through it? From a medical perspective, what was the treatment what was the treatment pathway you ended up using?
Yeah, so I got an email from Glenn Carlson, and he says, mate, you've got to talk to this guy called Tyler Tolman. And the sort of subject line was around the idea that the body, when given a chance, knows how to heal itself, given the right circumstances and environment. And so I had my surgery on the Tuesday, essentially, to remove the tumour and my left nut. But at the end of that surgery, the doctors came out and said, look, you've got about 12 weeks or so to recover from the surgery before we'll put you into a series of chemotherapy and radiation therapy, maybe if you need that far. Essentially, the surgery would have taken a good portion of the tumour out, but that chemo and radiotherapy would have kind of blasted out every last remaining bit. And I really didn't like the idea of having to go into chemo. And so in my mind, I had this 12-week window to say, well, if there wasn't any cancer by the time the chemo treatment was to begin, then effectively there'd be no need to do the chemo. So, yeah, thanks to that introduction by Glenn to this gentleman whose name was Tyler Tolman, he really mapped out a framework around 7 sort of philosophies or steps that people could do to put their body back into a state where it can heal itself. So things around the food that you take in, or the water, or sunshine, or even just what's going on in your mental space. And so, in essence, what I was around doing there was lots of fasting. Fasted for a good portion of that 12-week window, which for me was a really tough experience to go through. But lots of fasting, lots of cleansing of any toxins that had been built up in my body for a while. So the not very loved colonics and that were a great way to cleanse things out. And then, once those toxins had been removed, there was tons of, great nutritious food and around juices and vegetables. And I'd really cut out a lot of meat and sugar as well throughout that window, just to help re-nourish the body and get it back to a great state. Throughout that time, I was getting blood tests that would sort of track the progress of the tumour markers. And it was after, I think, 3 weeks or so, the tumour markers were down by like 60 or 70%. And so that kind of gave me, although it was really difficult to implement these strategies, I also could see some momentum that was happening from it all. And yeah, it was by about week 12 that pretty much all the cancer had gone, and showed up to the first appointment where it was time to sort of administer the chemo. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks. And that was pretty much it. I never really wanted to see any of the cancer doctors ever again in my life.
So how many hours a day were you fasting, or did you go days on end? What was the longest period of time you went without any food?
Yeah, so the rhythms over the 12 weeks were usually 3 to 4 days of fasting. And that was, at the same time, was almost daily colonics. Because when you're in that sort of fasting state, your body goes into what they call ketosis. I'm no major expert, but in essence, my body was converting or using a lot of the energy that it otherwise would have used to sort of process all my food to essentially just break down all the bad stuff in my body. And so it would sort of park that into what I was taught to be the river of life, or your colon. And so that's why it was super important at the same time to get the colonics, to get that crap out of you, in essence. So yeah, that was fairly uncomfortable, but that was pretty much done over those 4-day windows. And then for the remaining weeks that I was sort of back on, as much as I could, it was just around sort of nutritious juices and vegetables and fruits. So yeah, not much sugars, no coffees, not much meat throughout that window as well. So it's kind of like 4 days on the fast and 3 days off was kind of the rhythm over those 12 weeks.
How did you feel in that moment, energetically, emotionally, going through that?
Yeah, the first sort of 4 to 6 weeks I wasn't quite myself because I'd still had fairly major surgery. I was still unfortunately on some pretty heavy drugs just to sort of function. So that first sort of 6 weeks was not quite myself, but it was also by that time that the rhythm of the fasting and the clean eating and the lifestyle changes had started to kick in. So come the end of the 12 weeks, yeah, I probably felt as the clearest I've ever had and the lightest, not just, weight-wise, but just in terms of what I must have been carrying internally as well. A lot of that had cleared. And, there's no better feeling you can ever experience in your life when you, first of all, get cancer, but then, start getting reports or blood results back and just seeing that number go down and down and down and getting that final report of, there's no visible signs of cancer left. There's just no better feeling than that at all. So on all fronts, it felt amazing.
It's interesting, right? Because obviously the theme of this podcast is around exploring the dichotomies we experience in life. And, I feel like health and food is an interesting dichotomy that probably we all experience, which is what's actually really good for us from a health perspective. Things like fasting, regular cleansing, all those kind of things is, really challenging emotionally to be able to do that and not eat food. And for anyone that's fasted before, they'll understand that intellectually, fasting seems easy, but in reality, experiencing it's really hard because your body and whatever's going on at a neurochemical level is you stop eating food and it just starts screaming at you to consume food. And all of a sudden you're possessed. It's all you can think about is eating food. And it's not until you break through that kind of barrier and you get to a certain point where your body starts to move into ketosis and I don't know at a sort of a biological level exactly what's happening, but you kind of get to a point where you've got enough energy and and the weird thing is you go for a few days or 4 or 5 or 6 days of fasting. And by the end of it, you're like, have probably more energy than, you would have a day or 2 days into it because, the kind of changes you've gone through in your body have allowed you to be able to get rid of the crap that's in there and just start burning really clean fuel. But it's this challenge of, what's good for us at a physical level is really challenging emotionally. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, well, I found it funny because I think it was around about the same time, maybe just afterwards, that I had noticed you'd been setting yourself a lot of personal challenges. I think by way of reminder, were they 30-day challenges of different sort of varying tasks?
Yeah, I'd done a 30-day challenge of no booze, no caffeine, no sex, and no masturbation for 30 days.
That's great. So, I could draw some inspiration from yourself, but, in the pursuit of, doing well in the business world and also living a great life, there definitely has to be some level of doing things a little bit different to the way we've done them before and having a level of self-mastery. And I think, that challenge around the fasting was thrust upon me thanks to, now I see it, the gift that was cancer. But, you've been able to push yourself through these sort of personal challenges as well to really get that self-awareness and let's call it self-discipline and self-mastery happening. And I think that approach really helps serve us in many areas of our life. So, it is challenging emotionally, but it's probably going to best equip us for facing all the many challenges we're going to be facing in other areas of our life too.
Do you think it's something you'll continue doing, that fasting ritual or the kind of what you learnt in that period? Will it be an annual thing that you do now? Or?
Yeah, I'd love to say that I did continue following it religiously, but this is probably coming back to your whole dichotomy where when you're in one world, this other world tries to pull you back. And so, I've naturally fallen back into the rhythm and in the busyness of life, into my old habits. So, ideally I'd love that rhythm to be more on a monthly basis rather than annual, because I could see the difference that it made to me in that state. Imagine if we just kept our system in that continuous state of maintenance. But maybe through, listening to this podcast or hanging out with people like yourself, it's the question for me is how do I get that same level of resolve that I had when I was trying to fight cancer now when I'm not in that environment where I've got, I'm in a healthier state, but need a same level or if not higher level of self-motivation to make that ritual a reality.
I think that's such an interesting question. How do we get ourselves into that state where we have that level of resolve, like a reason why we're doing something, to, in your case, to eradicate yourself of cancer, such a strong motivator. And yet I find it so difficult to be able to replicate that level of intense drive or reason why sort of I may be doing something. In what other areas of your life do you feel you just naturally have that insatiable resolve to pursue a path or a dream or whatever it may be?
Yeah, my sort of default mechanism, which probably many other business owners, is diving into my business. I literally love the whole game of business and the process of having a problem, no matter how big or small it is, and turning that entrepreneurial hat on and trying to solve that. And I truly believe in the context of what you're just talking about before, when business owners have a purpose higher than profit, it can really help them sort of tap into this motivation that's bigger than themselves, and that can help them pull them out to do more than is required. The analogy I was thinking of the other day is there's scenarios where there's mothers who, in an environment where their child might be they've had a car crash and there's a child underneath the car, these mothers have been able to summon this all superhuman strength to lift that car up and get their child to safety. But, at the same time, a similar mother or similar me struggles to kind of get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym or do some CrossFit. So it definitely is around this space of what is the big goal that we're trying to work for? What is the motivating force that can really help us draw on this almost superhuman energy when we can find a way to tap into it?
Harvey, do you have a sentence that you use to kind of sum up your life's mission?
Out of interest, what would be your version of that sentence?
Really good question. Being in the interview seat means I get to ask all the good questions, but often many times I don't have answers to those questions myself. To be honest, it's not a question that I feel I have clarity on being able to answer. It's kind of why I've been asking my guests at the last couple of interviews that I've done. And interestingly, a few people I've spoken to have had like a really clear sort of mission statement for their life. And I sort of reflected on it. I'm like, oh shit, I don't feel like I've got that sort of clear mission statement, even though I've got this canvas up on my wall I call my 2020 dent, and I call it dent obviously because of the Dent Business Accelerators. But kind of for me that sums up the dent in the universe I want to make in the next 2-3 years, or I wrote it 3 years ago, and how I see my life looking in 2020. And there's things like life manifesto on there. There's people I'd like to meet. There's philosophies I want to live by, principles I live by, financial goals, and all these sort of things. And I've got a lot of color around it. But is there a kind of a single sentence that for me sort of sums up my mission and purpose on the planet? I'm not sure. I think I'm kind of discovering it. And if you don't have an answer to that question, that's cool too. I was just curious to know if that's something you've ever thought about, or if there was a shape to it, what would the shape be?
Yeah. Well, I think this really speaks to kind of why we're here talking about the dichotomy today, is that if you were to ask me that question in the context of business, like I almost have every single month and quarter and the next decade planned out to a T within our business. We've got sort of clear vision, mission, and values. And I was just talking about this with my business partner the other day, and I said, imagine if we had that same level of rigor and structure around that we do have in our business, but in our family world. And we have the same type of culture that we not just let happen, but obviously in business, we have a specific set of routines and rhythms that get our team into a particular sort of culture. Imagine if we had that same thing for our family worlds. And that's an imbalance that I could see that exists, at least in my life right now. And I'd love to have that mission statement and a clear set of values and some rhythms around what does an ideal family life look like. But probably one thing that does come to mind recently is it was through KPI that you guys helped us get clear on sort of 3 key values that sort of summarize our culture. And it was through the process of becoming a dad recently that I realized how true that value statement was, both in my business world and also our family world. And so for you guys, can you remind me what it is, Mike? It's around being brave.
Well, our company values for Dent is to be brave, to have fun, and to make a dent in the universe. And those 3 values kind of epitomize why we exist, and also why our clients are kind of doing what they do, because they want to ultimately be brave in business, have fun while they're at it, and go make a bit of a dent in the universe.
Yeah, that's lovely. And so it was that context that helped us come up with ours, which were dream big, make an impact, and remember your roots. And similarly, in a business environment, it helped us focus on or identify key team members as to whether they'd be a great fit with our business. But, in the process of becoming a dad recently, I was looking at, Havana and thinking about her future. And if I were to be giving her sort of any sort of statements or nuggets of advice about what I'd love to see her do in the future, I tested those three words. And, do I want her to dream big? Yes. Would I love her to make an impact? Absolutely. And would I love her to always remember her roots and her family and where she's from, and for that to be a motivating force behind, the path that she leads in life? And that's a big yes as well. So maybe it isn't quite yet a mission statement, and that's part of my exploration. But I think those three values that you helped us kind of settle into, I think the reality check that they work beautifully in business as well as they do in family life really helped kind of confirm that they were true in the truest sense of the word.
I think it's what you said before is something I've thought a lot about, and I find it endlessly fascinating for me personally, because I'm a bit of a personal development geek, and I geek out at sort of the intersection of human potential and personal empowerment and entrepreneurship and business, and I've often thought about that same question, which is the level of structure and rigor that we bring to building a scaffolding, if you like, around how to run a business, from things like having clear values, having a clear kind of reason for existence, 10-year visions to 3 years to 1 year to quarterly rocks to, weekly huddles and weekly meetings and, even to daily huddles. And yet in our family life and our personal life, how often do we adopt those same best practices into how to run a really great family? And really, if we think about it, a business and a company is just a collection of human beings, as is a family. And so why would we not apply the same principles of what really allows a business to grow and thrive and flourish and, do good in the world and have an impact, and to allow its human beings, its members, to become the best version of themselves and contribute and give back. And, you know what I mean? It seems so logical in my brain that we do the same thing with family, yet I find that maybe there's a bit of a stigma around, doing that in family. It's like if I started talking to some of my friends, certain friends about this or other people, and I talked about, running my family in the same way that, I'd run a business, I would feel like I was being judged and labeled as being kind of callous and sterile and all these kind of things. What's your perspective on that? I'm so curious.
Yeah. Well, I think if we ran our family home like we run our business, I probably would have been fired from the family as being a pretty poor employee sometimes. But there's three rhythms that I can say that we now have brought across from our business world into our family world that has really helped us out. First of all, in our business world, we do a daily huddle. It's called 747. And at 7:47 every morning, the whole team stand up in our huddle and we share, A, what are we grateful for today? B, what are our top three priorities that would make today great? And C, do we need a hand or can we give a hand to somebody else in the team? And so that really helped in the business context because everybody in the team got an understanding of what everybody was up to. And if you were struggling, you could sort of call it out and somebody might be able to share some assistance. But that first question around, what are you grateful for, really helps center us into this, idea that we've got a new day. Let's make it one worth living. And so now we've brought that across to my family world, where every morning we've got a rhythm now of going for a coffee as a family just before school drop-offs, and we essentially run through those same three questions, a little bit less formal than we would in the business context, but the same essence is still there. The second rhythm that transported across really well was one of my favorite things we do in our business on Fridays is called Team Thank You, and was inspired by the team at Thank You, who is an amazing organization where 100% of their profits go to end global poverty. You may have heard about the water, Mike, or some of their nappy products and body care products. Thank You do and taught us to do is have a standing team huddle every Friday, and it usually goes for about 30 or 40 minutes. And all we do is we call out different people in the team and thank them and acknowledge them for different things that we've heard or seen them achieve throughout the week. So in the business context, you might thank Ali for, that new client that came on board, or you might thank Gabriella for doing the cleaning around the office that keeps the space great. And it's an amazing experience. I really encourage you to try it, Mike, and your team and any other people who are listening, because what we've found is that in the business context, busyness that is, a high-performing team, we can get, sidetracked ticking off the to-do list and powering through all these things and tasks, but we could also leave the week with a lack of fulfillment. And so no one ever leaves that thank you circle without ever feeling that full sense of gratitude and connection to the impact that they make. And so in the personal world then, we've started that rhythm on a Sunday afternoon as a family. We try to do either a picnic in the park or some sort of dinner that sort of signifies that the end of the week and the beginning of a new week. And the loose agenda around that is, acknowledging each other, whether it's my partner Sarah, who's 26 years old, or my sort of stepdaughter Mila, who's only 6 years old. We're thanking each other for, again, things that we've are grateful for what each other did throughout the week. And then we're getting clear about what is the plan for the week ahead, who's going to be where, what times, this activity, who are we trying to catch up with socially, or who are we inviting over for dinner. And again, just like it would in a team environment, it gets our family really aligned and on the same page with, the week ahead and the gratitude that should signify the home environment. And just quickly, the last one that transferred really well is in our business, we do every quarter a 2-day team retreat. And it's really based around this idea that if we, Paolo Lencioni said that if we could just get everybody in the organization all rowing in the same direction, we could literally take over, any market and any time in any one other element. And so, we spend 2 days every quarter getting the team realigned, not just with our business goals and where we're heading in the next 10 years, 3 years, and specifically in the next quarter, but we also help the team get on track with their personal goals in that same framework as well. In the family context, we've just started taking a family holiday every quarter, but it isn't solely just let's go to the beach and not think about life. Again, we create a sort of a loose agenda around making sure that we're pulling out the goals that our family had set for this year, seeing whether we're on track or not, ticking off some things on the bucket list that we've been able to achieve throughout that quarter, or more so getting online or getting aligned with what are the goals that as a family we're trying to achieve together in the next quarter. So there've been sort of 3 rhythms that in our business world we've found have transferred over pretty well so far into our family lives.
I love it. I love it so much. I think about those things a lot, and I've thought about those very same things. So it's so cool for me to hear that you've been implementing that, and that's been working really well. And at the moment, I don't kind of have that sort of same family setting in terms of partner and kids and that kind of thing. But kind of when the day comes around, it's really cool to hear that example. Do you have goals written down and visible to everyone in the family? Do you come together for a goal setting meeting at the beginning? Do you use any kind of, I know this might sound a bit silly, but do you use any templates or anything like that to do this, or is it just very ad hoc, just held in everyone's heads?
Yeah, well, this is where the sort of dichotomy of 2 people in a relationship come into play, where you might have one person who's myself, who's super organized. I've got spreadsheets for days that outline my next 10 years, all the personal plans, etc. And my beautiful partner, Sarah, she has a little bit more of an in the flow and in the moment kind of personality. So we don't necessarily have a template that I pull out on the kitchen table and ask everybody to fill in the blanks. I tried that in the beginning and it just didn't work. And it was more so, I think the initial reaction was like, come on, mate, it's not Inspire anymore. This is home. You leave that stuff in the office. And so I got some feedback that while the intention was the same to create that same level of direction and purpose around where our family was going and why it existed, I knew that the same mechanisms couldn't exactly transfer across. So usually how it works is I'll definitely have a template, and I have all of our family's goals sort of written down on what I call, or what you guys taught me was to be my bucket list. But it doesn't necessarily come out and asking people to fill in the blanks. I'm usually just driving a conversation, typically over a long lunch or maybe at a beach environment where I know we've got some time to talk about these things. And then what is discussed, I personally, because I'm that sort of way inclined, will transfer it back to the goals list. But then that same updated goals list, just subtly, I'll have printed and just stuck up on the microwave somewhere, or in the kitchen or around the family home. So that means that everybody knows that it exists. We spoke about it and it's there. But, Sarah, I know she's got it in her head or in her own unique way. And I've got my preference. So as long as it lives and it's been discussed and we've got a way to kind of refer back to it as a family, we've definitely had to make it work just based on our unique sort of preferences.
I love it. I love it. Do you know any other people in your world that adopt the same frame, like principles for family, or is it just a thing unique for you?
Yeah, well, the rhythm that we got into kind of started with me and my business partner, Ben, who, we're in the rhythm of catching up every quarter, mapping out our plans, writing down our goals. And so we'd always sort of discussed this idea of, man, what if we had this same level of structure that we have in our team, in our family? And so he was the one who taught me this idea about going for these family holidays that are specifically around the idea of goal setting. So he's been a great person to set the lead. But outside of us two, I've not really seen many people do it. I'd love to get some guidance from those who have had some experience, but to date, I've not yet met anyone.
Well, mate, I commend you for adopting it and being brave and courageous to do it, because I think it does take bravery and real courage to be able to bring kind of a family unit together around these same principles that, as I said, there's probably a bit of a stigma around, but I think it's really aspirational. So I'm inspired by you, mate, as many people I'm sure listening would be as well. If I was to shift gears a little bit, Harvey, and ask you, I'm curious around how you think about perception. And I use that phrase because I think in life, our perception determines our reality. And of course, the same event can be perceived in entirely different ways to two human beings. And one of the things I've noticed about you is you have it seems to me, a cool perception on life and, how life is happening for you or not just to you. And you have a very sort of happy, positive, optimistic, grateful kind of perception of different events in life. Is that something that you've actively fostered or nurtured, or is it something that's just come really naturally to you?
If I could put my finger on the point at which that moment was kind of created or fostered in my life, that would be amazing, because then we could kind of help everybody create that same moment too. We recently, in our last team retreat, went through the process of helping all of our team understand their unique genius or their unique talent. And we did a process called the Wealth Dynamics Profile, which is done by Roger Hamilton. And that's been a really great framework for me to understand myself and what lights me up and what my strengths and also at the same time weaknesses are. But in terms of where that originally kind of came from or how that was created, I'd have to say it was around this idea that you taught us around environment dictates performance. And, my environment when we grew up or when we were born is that, we were born into a pretty poor part of New Zealand. And, mum and dad didn't have much of an education. They were teenage parents. I think mum was 13 when she had my sister and 16 when she had me. So, we didn't really have much money or opportunity or any education. So we did what most poor New Zealand families did back then, who wanted a better opportunity, and they moved to Australia, which was, at the time and still is the land of opportunity. And so I grew up in an environment where we literally had no money, no education, no friends. Mum was telling me the other day she would take us to Woolworths, or at the time was Franklin's, to essentially steal food for dinner when we didn't have enough money to buy it. And so the culture in which I was brought up was one of, you have this opportunity before you. Nothing's going to come and fall into your lap. If you want to create something in your life for the good of your life, then you've got to go out there and in essence, just work for it and create it yourself, because it's definitely not going to drop from the sky, or it's not going to be served to you on a silver platter. And so, in a sense, I think growing up in an environment of lack or of, you could call it poverty or starting from ground zero is a little bit of an advantage in a sense, because, at that very early age, you're taught these core ideas around hard work, resilience, getting out there and making things happen for yourself. And these are all sort of attributes and virtues that really help you in the pursuit of business and as well the pursuit of living a great life. So compared to someone who may not have had to struggle when they were younger, or maybe had all those things sort of given to them, maybe on a bit of a silver platter, it's difficult, because I, in a sense, feel sorry for them because they've not had an environment to kind of learn these key attributes that now are some of our greatest strengths. I think that's in the early days where some of those formative experiences have helped contribute to the people that we are all today.
And your whole family, right? I've spent a bit of time with your family and extended family, and it's not just you, right? Your whole family is like this, right? Everyone seems to be, and by the way, I'm sure like all human beings, all families, you guys have got your ups and your downs and challenges as well. But just the perception that I've had is that everyone has a very optimistic, loving, grateful personality and attitude. How much do you feel the kind of the support or the loving attitude that your family kind of has was pivotal in helping you guys to be able to ride through those really difficult circumstances? Because for some people, the circumstances you described could tear the family apart, and create, people could become, violent or just depressed or whatever it may be. And yet you guys seem to have moved through it with a really positive outlook. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think it's 100% the reason that I am the person I am today, and I have that sort of perspective and outlook. And, since becoming a dad, it's also reinforced to me now that was mum and dad's, or that is the role of parents, to kind of influence our children and their upbringing. And maybe the thing that I've learned is that whether we realize it or not, or whether we're actively doing it or not, we're always influencing those people who are around us, for the good or for better or for worse. And it's to that point we were speaking around earlier on, like around having some rigor and some structure about where the family's going. Because, in business and in life, we can either just go with the flow and let stuff happen, and everything that we get in our lives or the places that we find ourselves, it kind of happens there by chance. And that's what would happen if we just did nothing and defaulted to the status quo. Or if we, focus on our business and our life with an intention and some direction about where we're going and who would need to be to get to that place. That to me is really summarizes my role as a leader in my business world and also a leader in my family world. And so back to your question, it is definitely what mum and dad did, and that sort of family culture that we had of being resilient and pushing through obstacles, that I believe was an intentional sort of focus that mum and dad did. And now that's my goal, to sort of carry that same intention through with my family and business too.
How much do you feel you need to choose between family and business?
That's the great dichotomy that you speak of. I feel very torn, very, very torn between the two worlds. I'm just coming off of a beautiful week's holiday that we just did down in northern New South Wales, just after the end of the financial year. And so I love nothing more than being with the family by the beach, playing Scrabble literally all day long, or Monopoly, or cooking a great family meal. But at the same time, I equally, as much as I love my family, I really do love the process and the game that is business, and sort of implementing all the little tactics and seeing them work and some not working. And so I'm very much torn between those two worlds. That is my intersection of business and family. And so, yeah, in short, it is a struggle, kind of swinging between those two worlds.
Has that determined or sort of dictated how much you pursue business? For example, have you actively made a decision that you're not going to go and build an enormous empire because you feel that would detract from family? Or do you feel that you can find the right blend and balance between the two and have both? Do you feel that's possible?
Yeah, well, no, I've definitely made a decision to build an empire, very much a performance-based business that would require a high level of personal demand and exertion. So I've definitely not shied away from that pursuit in business. I think to offset that, though, what I have, at the best of my ability, tried to do along the way is what would I need to do in my family world that would make sure that we're doing that with their blessing and that I still had enough sort of energy and vigor to lead our family in the same way that I'm doing our business. So, for example, we got some really great structures around when I work and when I don't work. So we've got rhythms in the morning about if I'm looking after the baby or whether someone else is getting somebody ready for school. And then we'll make sure that we all always have a family breakfast in the morning, maybe a coffee together before we all sort of head our separate ways. And then at the end of the day, same rhythm around that family dinner is kind of wrapping up that day, bookending that day to make sure it sort of starts and ends with family. So yeah, in short, I'm still definitely pursuing those big, lofty business goals, but I'm making sure I'm sort of implementing some structure along the way so that I'm not doing the business stuff at the cost of the family world, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I feel like in my brain, because I have this real on or off kind of personality, it's like either all in or all off. And for anyone else that can relate to that who may be listening, it can often feel like you're stuck in this dichotomy between the two, that there's no such thing as a blend of both, because it's like I'm either all on in business and, it's sort of wake up till go to bed focused and thinking about the business. And even, when I'm not doing that, it's, getting into those present state awareness, that sort of real present moment experience with family or friends or whatever it may be, can be challenging. But it sounds like for you, the kind of the secret sauce to all of this is actually around just a few of those simple routines, rituals, and structures to be able to create the balance.
Yeah, that's it. And I try to integrate both worlds as much as I can. So, for Havana and my little stepdaughter Miller, I'd love for them to be exposed as much as possible to what goes on in the business world. So, they're present. You would have seen when we had that essentially board meeting with all of your team at the end of the retreat down in Newcastle recently. Miller was there and present, and I want her to recognize that the business world, has its ups and downs and it has its different responsibilities, and I'd love her to be exposed to that. But, what we do is we use a business, let's call it a business obligation, and we try as best as we can to turn that into a family opportunity. So if I go and speak at an event such as the one of yours down in Newcastle, I brought the family along, and we've wrapped a bit of a family escape around that excuse. And my whole family was there when I spoke at that particular business event, and I was probably the proudest I've ever been because of, I had them there as my most special audience. Later this year, I'm speaking at an accounting event in San Diego in the States. And so again, we've used that as that business obligation as a family opportunity to wrap a holiday to Disneyland and down to Mexico afterwards. And I just don't believe that particular trip, as an example, would have happened if it weren't for sort of that business opportunity or the business obligation I had. So yeah, we can see the business responsibilities that we all have as, a reason why we can't do things with and for our family and why we don't have enough time, left over for them. Or I'm trying my best to find how I can turn that business obligation into a little opportunity for the family. And so far it's been a bit of fun.
I love it. And I've written down business obligation into a family opportunity. It's just such a great reframe around that. And I suppose that comes back to that thing of perception, right? It's like, the way you perceive the obligation and reframe it into a family opportunity feels like it beautifully marries together those two worlds. And yeah, I think that's a really fascinating outlook. So, Harvey, if I was to kind of shift gears slightly, and again, I'm conscious of time as well. You've had a lot of success. Is it 32 years old? Is that right? Yeah, so 32, yep. You're running a really high-performing lifestyle business, which is preparing to build into what we call a performance business in Inspire. You've got a team of over a dozen people now, and you're absolutely positioned as leaders within your field without a shadow of a doubt. You know, when people look at accounting firms here in Australia, you would pop up as absolutely one of the top leaders in your industry, irrespective of financial performance, of which is strong, but just from a brand perspective, from a visibility perspective, it's all incredibly admirable, and let alone at the age of 32. When have you, if I could ask to the kind of the reverse of that, when have you most felt like a failure?
Definitely back to the beginning of this interview around when I had that cancer scare or that cancer experience. I remember this one moment where I had just found out that, or the doctor had just sort of inspected downstairs and he goes, "Oh, look, this doesn't look good." And I was sitting on the MRI table, being sort of put under there to do a little scan, and I was just on my own. No one else is in the room, as what happens in MRIs. And yeah, I didn't know kind of what the future held, and I had to do this kind of personal assessment, a little balance sheet of my life as to whether, if this was it, was I happy with the life that I had lived? And honestly, in that moment, I was really disappointed to have been in that circumstance. And why I felt that way is, although no one exactly knows how cancer, for example, is created, my mind went to what responsibility did I play in getting me to this situation where I am today, because I do take responsibility for it. And what I couldn't help but kind of settle on the answer was that for all my life, as long as I've ever known, we've always been hard workers. That's sort of summarizes our family, one of our key family values. But I also know, maybe, Mike, if you sort of visualize in your car, you've got, I think it's a speedo, and it's got that little dial that has, like, I think it counts from 1 to 8. And from 1 to 5, it's in sort of like a green, sort of relatively safe or manageable zone. And then from 5 to 8, it's in that sort of red zone, which in the context of a car, I think it's somewhat unsustainable, and it's pushing the car sort of to its limit. And I know you couldn't just drive around like that, for a long time. And I sort of had this vision of that little pointer, and being in that high, unsustainable, pushing to the limit range had really been the summary of most of my life, but particularly the last 5 to 10 years, because that's when I had made kind of the most sort of personal exertion and most effort in the business world. And so it was kind of like along the way, I knew that I was pushing too hard. I knew I had pushed it to an unsustainable level, and I knew that I couldn't kind of keep this up forever. But at the same time, because I had so many demands in the business world and I enjoyed it as well, I didn't have anything that would take me out of that sort of high unsustainable range. And I heard an interesting quote about cancer the other day. Basically, it said that some people think that cancer's a death sentence, but really it's just some feedback, or it's your body saying, "What the hell?" Like it's a cry for help. So yeah, I'm most disappointed that I ignored kind of my own self-awareness all the way along of realizing that I was in that unsustainable level. And it took something as drastic as cancer and putting me on that MRI table that day to realize that I can't continuously operate in that, that unsustainable zone. Although I think as business owners and entrepreneurs, we all do it. We're all consistently working big days, long hours, super stressful environment because of the nature of the demands that we have on ourselves. We don't feed ourselves well. We don't nourish ourselves well. We don't give ourselves breaks. But, that's part and parcel of the entrepreneur journey. And so, again, it took me, losing a nut and getting cancer to kind of get that feedback mechanism to go, you know what, you've got to pull back into that safe zone. And so that's why I see the cancer experience as now being a gift, because it gave me that level of perspective. But again, my sort of journey, or maybe this is the purpose of this podcast, is how can people get that sense of balance and what's important in life without having to have a great medical emergency happen to them to get their attention back.
So eloquently put. And it's hard, right? Like if it wasn't for the cancer, knowing what you know now, right? If for those listening, they're not blindsided by cancer, but they recognize that they might be redlining in their life. There's a little bit of chatter going on in the back of their mind. There's a subtle awareness. They're pushing the edge of the limits, and they're actually sacrificing more than what they should be to lead a good life. Have you got any recommendations as to how they could help to get that reset that they might need?
Yeah, I run an accounting firm, so we're numbers people. So I'd say it's the answer is in numbers. And there's sort of two pathways to this. One, you could do an honest self-assessment. Let's call it on a scale of 1 to 10 on how happy you are or satisfied you are in each of the key areas in your life, not just the business world, but also with your relationships, with your passion, with your love, your friendship or your social circles, your own maybe spirituality or your health and your fitness, whatever is important to you that would make your whole life kind of complete outside of the business world. If we could have or give ourselves the gift of that honest self-assessment of where we really are in all those areas, what I noticed I would have been at that time was I was essentially a 10 out of 10 in business and probably a 1 to 3 out of 10 in all the other areas of my life, because it was just, business would come first and everything else was at second, third, or well down the track. So that method, I'd say, would help work if we've got a high level of self-awareness and let's call it self-determination to get ourselves back on track. But if we don't kind of have that, then the second set of numbers that might be helpful is just going to a doctor or a personal trainer or some form of health coach, whether they be a nutritionist or a naturopath or whatever it may be, and ask them to do the assessment on us. Because at the end of the day, numbers don't lie. And if we were able to do a test on, whatever area is important to us, even if it weren't health, if we were to just honestly ask our partner or the person who's closest to us to honestly assess how they think we're going in key areas in our life, if we're strong enough to listen or be open to and listen to the feedback that one of those tests would give us, I think that would really do wonders in terms of giving us a bit of a wake-up call. So hopefully give us the motivation to get ourselves back on track before maybe our bodies do it for us, before our relationships crumble and they give us the feedback for us, or before our businesses crumble and it's too late.
Thanks for sharing, man. I think that's an amazing way to approach it. If I could maybe share a quick little story myself. Recently, I'm a member of an organization called EO, and we got together with our EO forum members and we went away for a couple of days. And one of the exercises we did, which was a simple exercise, which to be honest, I kind of brushed off in the beginning thinking I already know the answer to this, which was on the table, this facilitator had laid out, I don't know, maybe 200 little cards. And on these cards was a word, and that word would describe a principle or a value that, just a principle or a value. And so our objective was to go and look through and sift through the couple of hundred cards and find the top 5 cards that most resonated with us, that really sort of described what we valued the most. And so we went through and I found about a dozen cards initially, and then whittled them down to the 5 that I felt were most meaningful to me, which I kind of already knew. I was looking at them and I was like, I kind of knew these were my values, and that really, really reaffirms what's important to me. But then the next step in the process was we would, up on the wall, we'd have a big bit of butcher's paper, and there would be 3 columns. And in the middle column, we would describe, what does it mean to have that value in balance? And we'd sort of describe on the bit of paper, okay, well, it means this, it looks and feels like this. And then on the left side, we'd write, what does it mean to have too little of this value? And on the right side, what does it mean to have too much of this value? So, for example, when we'd gone through and then ordered in a hierarchy as to 1 to 5, what were the most important things to us? For me, love was number 1. And so I described what it meant in balance. And then I described what would it mean if I had too little love? Well, it would be, maybe feeling lonely or sad or those kind of things, a bit isolated. What does it mean if you have too much love? Well, I'd feel, trapped or suffocated by that kind of love. And then, what it means to be in balance. And we did this for each of the 5 values, and then you can kind of guess where it's going. The next bit was take that Post-it note with that value, and we'd put it on the scale as to where we felt we were. And it wasn't until I did that I went and scaled all of them. I was like, oh, holy shit. I can actually now see which things are in and out of balance. And even though I knew these values were important to me, I just wasn't aware of how much some were I was getting too little of and some I was getting too much of. And it was just that wake-up call for me too that really reaffirmed this kind of next stage in my journey, which is, I've been building Dent here in Australia to alongside my business partner Glenn, to the point of where it's at today. We're operational in 3 cities. We've got a really, really fantastic brand and all these kind of things. But I recognized that there was this, imbalance in my life where I needed to go off and go on a bit of a journey of self-discovery and adventure and ultimately, head overseas to open up another office for Dent in Vancouver, Canada. And when I did that exercise, it just absolutely kind of reaffirmed, for me, that was the reset that I needed, was to go on this journey. And I'm so glad that I kind of now have, because it, rather than being blindsided by cancer or something as significant as that, just a little exercise like that of self-awareness can be the trigger to reorganize your life to get it back into balance.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So inspiring, bro.
So Harvey, maybe kind of if we wrap up, and I want to thank you again for your time. It's been a joy and a pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation and always enjoy our chats. And I feel like you've shared just so much wisdom and gold and amazing stuff about business and life, and ultimately how to lead a good life. And so if I could maybe just finish by asking you, and this is maybe a bit of a big question, but answer it as best you can, or feel free to pass on it if you don't feel you'd have the right kind of answer. But if the bout with cancer had gone differently and the doctors had said to you, Harvey, it's not looking good, you've only got the next 12 months at most to live. If you had been given that news kind of at that point in your life, or maybe let me ask the question right now, right at this point in your life today, how would you spend the next 12 months? What would you do with your time?
Honestly, would continue doing everything that I'm doing now. Only because I really, truly feel right now I'm in a great state of where I am in flow, and I'm doing things that I love to do. We travel regularly as our family. We're building a great business that makes a great impact on our team, on our clients, and ultimately on the world through the charitable work that we do. And so I'd love to know that when I'm not here, and this day will come, that there are different things or organizations or movements that exist because I was here. And that, Havana, who as of today is 8 weeks old, but one day she'll be 80, and her grandkids will be able to look back at these things, whether it's my book or the videos we created or the charitable causes that exist or have thrived because of our presence. They've got a mechanism to be able to know who Harvee Pene was and sort of point a finger or make a clear line as to exactly what was the dent in the universe that he had made. So, yeah, honestly, I'd keep building the things, whether it be a book or a business or a time with my family. I'd probably try and make 1 or 2 more kids if I could in that little 12-month window, so that I had these sort of points of legacy to live on beyond me. So that's where I would do.
Amazing answer. Harvee Pene, thank you very much for jumping on the Dichotomy podcast.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that.
Hey, so thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As you know, I just love talking life, business, philosophy with like-minded souls who think deeply about the world, their business, and how to live a good life. I'll be releasing episodes on this podcast as regularly as possible, at least twice a week for the foreseeable future, so stay tuned for the next episode. And if you want to join a community of ambitious and driven entrepreneurs, mavericks, change makers, those kind of people, then head to my website, www.mikejamesreid.com. And that's Reid spelled R-E-I-D. You'll find a whole bunch of resources to be able to connect with me and a community of entrepreneurs that are up to something in the world. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Oh, and one final request. If you've enjoyed this show, please give it an honest rating and review on iTunes or any other way that you listen to the podcast. I'd really appreciate it. It just helps the show get found and out to more people's ears who will hopefully love it as much as you do. Thanks so much again, and much love from me.